And welcome to KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido here on Trek Tuesday, making the pandemic palatable by reading my writings, specifically this year of my Star Trek Starfleet Corps of Engineers work. This week, we are finally concluding the two-book series Invincible, which I wrote with New York Times bestselling author David Mack, way back in 2001 when we were both little baby authors as opposed to the grizzled veterans we are now. And this is the final part of this solo adventure of Commander Sonya Gomez, which was tremendous fun for the two of us to do back in the day. And it's been really fun reading it for you now. And when at the end of this, I'll tell you what's on deck next. Anyway, without further ado, or I don't, here is Part 5 of Book 2 of S.C.E. number 8, Invincible, by David Mack and Keith R.A. DeCandido. Here we go. First Officer's Log. Commander Sonya Gomez, Planet Sarindar, Stardate 53290.6. At 10 minutes prior to midnight, I came out from behind the barricade, leaving Razka safe inside. I had the feeling that the shii would attack us as soon as it could. Its function is to collect heads for its owners. It had targeted my particular head on 3 occasions now without getting it. I don't know if it's capable of grudge matches, in fact I'm sure it isn't, but I also suspect that it was programmed to keep trying to fulfill its goals. That meant that it would keep trying for me until it had my head. That at least was my plan. It turned out to be accurate. I waited near the concave dish that formed the most prominent part of the S.A. The tricorder was able to detect its approach, and I fired a shot from the sonic rifle near it to give it pause. Then I ran toward the S.A. dish. As soon as I got to the ladder that would lead me up to the S.A., I fired a shot with the rifle at the ground behind me, then again at one of the crystal bushes near the ladder. It wouldn't delay the shii much, but I only needed to slow it down enough to make up the difference between its 4 legs and my 2. Excerpt from a letter from Razka on Sarindar to Marag on Nalori, 16th day of Sendrak, 23rd year of Tog. Everything seemed fine until the barricade failed. I should have known that the curse of Sarindar wasn't finished with me just yet. Luckily, Commander Gomez is no fool. She gave me her tricorder device. She had modified it so that it would emit a sonic pulse. The idea was that if the monster shii came for me, I should activate the pulse. As soon as the barricade failed, I clutched the tricorder to myself for dear life. I looked at the tableau in front of me. A fierce wind was blowing, as often happens at night. The crystalline trees and bushes made a mild tinkling noise that almost sounded musical. To the right was the massive concave dish that was the focus of so much of our labors. Commander Gomez was climbing the ladder to the dish. The monster shii was standing at the ladder's base. I somehow doubted it had ever encountered anything like this ladder before. Then it turned to look at me. It ran for me. It happened again, Marag. I froze. But this time I was able to push the button. Though I could not raise or activate a weapon, I was somehow able to make myself activate the sonic pulse. And it worked. The monster shii stopped dead in its tracks. Then it went for me a second time, and I pushed the button again. In fact, Marag, it is not truly a button, but a touch-sensitive control, but allow a frightened old man to wax poetic. Amusingly enough, it worked again, and a third time. After that, the monster shii turned around and ran back toward the ladder. I looked up to see that Commander Gomez had climbed up to the top of the dish. First Officer's Log, Supplemental. As soon as I got to the edge of the dish, I turned to see that the shii had turned its attention to Razka. I braced my legs in the struts of the ladder and then fired a shot over the shii's head. Since the shii was staying about 3 meters away from Razka, yet not facing him, I assumed that the sonic pulse I built into the tricorder worked. but I had no way to judge how long it would last, and besides, I needed to get the shii up to the dish. So I fired. Sure enough, the shii turned around, probably deciding that Razka's head wasn't worth all this trouble anyhow, and ran back to the dish. It loped over to the bottom of the ladder, and then tried to figure out how to climb up it. I looked down and tried to figure out the same thing. The shii had triangular paws, no individual claws or fingers or anything like that. Presumably, the shii that the creature emulated had evolved in that way as the most adequate way to navigate Sarindar's glassy surface. Unfortunately, it wasn't very useful for climbing up ladders with rounded rungs. Of course, the whole point of the exercise was to lure the shii up the ladder to the SA dish. Something else I didn't think of. Latest in a series. Collect them all. Then the shii's paws changed shape to something closer to a human hand. That made sense. It and its smaller companion had taken on the shape of a shii in order to blend in with the local fauna, and, being a machine, hadn't changed shape to anything else since then because it hadn't had reason to. Now, though, it did. Armed with its newfound opposable thumbs, it clambered up the ladder. As soon as the shii was about 3/4 of the way up the ladder, I did some clambering of my own onto the outer edge of the dish. The plan was to get the shii up on the edge also, and then immobilize it. It was a good plan. So naturally, it all went to hell. Excerpt from a letter from Razka on Sarindar to Merrick on Nalori, 16th day of Sindrak, 23rd year of Talk. I watched as Commander Gomez stood on the dish's edge. The monster shii climbed the rest of the way up. She raised her weapon. The creature, however, moved faster than expected. Actually, that is not true. The creature had been moving fast all along. It is simply so fast that it is difficult to comprehend just how fast it is. I suspect that Commander Gomez failed to anticipate this. One cannot blame her. This monster is very easy to underestimate. The monster attacked her, knocking her weapon out of her hands. She lost her balance and fell into the dish. The rifle, though, fell down the outside of the dish and plummeted to the ground. This presented me with something of a dilemma, Merrick. You see, Commander Gomez needed that rifle in order to stop the shii, which meant that I needed to grab the rifle and get it to her. However, that meant getting much closer to the shii than I particularly wanted. Besides, I knew that if I picked up the rifle, I would freeze again. I remembered Commander Gomez's words. She told me of the engineer's axiom that when garbage goes in, garbage comes out. I am like that. I hold a rifle, I freeze. It is the way of things. But I promised Commander Gomez that I would continue to do my job. I had told her that that was why I stayed behind. Of course, that is not the real reason. The truth is that the other workers did not want me with them on the Culloden. They also did not want Commander Gomez with them. While all of them believed her to be bad luck, well, not all of them believed her to be bad luck, enough of them did. And enough of those also thought I fell into that category. That was why they waited to take off until they knew that she was away from the camp. However, I did not wish her to know that. Besides, what I told her was true. I wanted to redeem myself, to do my job. I owed her that much. I owed myself that much. So I ran for the rifle. I picked it up. And I climbed the ladder, trying not to pay attention to the scream of pain I heard from the inner workings of the dish. First Officer's Log, Supplemental. I tumbled into the inside of the dish, the duranium panels colliding with my body in a nastily bone-jarring manner. I managed to halt my descent, stopping myself at what appeared to be 50 meters down into the dish, or halfway to the center. It was about where the dish started to flatten out a bit and get less steep. I quickly tried to get my bearings, attempting to stand up and keep my balance. The rifle was nowhere to be seen, which made my life a hell of a lot more complicated. The shii was still at the perimeter of the dish. Since I was unarmed and could barely keep my balance, I was at a distinct disadvantage. Then it started running down the dish toward me, its paws having morphed back into shii form, since that was much more efficient for decapitating. This worked in my favor, actually, as the claws, which could easily get a grip on the crystalline surface of Sarindar, couldn't grab a hold of duranium. So instead of loping gracefully down the inner surface of the dish, it slipped, slid, and tumbled down the dish, past me, and toward the center. I just needed to be able to press this advantage. Unfortunately, no real opportunity to do so presented itself. Instead, I found myself facing this creature from 50 meters away, with it standing between me and my only legitimate means of escape, the center of a dish. There was a small hatch in the center that was my best bet for getting out of there. Climbing up the edge of the dish wasn't going to be much of an option. Then the creature somehow managed to get enough of a grip on the dish to take one giant leap toward me. Starfleet training kicked in, and I managed to roll with the impact as it landed on me, rolling upward at the first, then tumbling back down toward the center as gravity took over from the force of the impact. I took a kick at it, but before I could, it slashed at my cheek. I cried out in surprise as much as pain, then followed through on the kick. The kick didn't do much to damage it, though it felt like it had done plenty to my foot. But it wound up being enough for the shii to lose its balance and start scrabbling around on the dish some more. Under other circumstances, I might have found it amusing watching it try desperately to maintain some kind of grip, its arms flailing with each attempt failed. I was standing in the middle of a concave dish at night on a crystal planet facing a creature out to kill me. I was armed with nothing more than a torn Starfleet uniform and a battered copy of someone else's religious text, and my brain, which I had always relied on in the past. However, it was failing me now. There had to be some way to keep the creature still long enough for me to get off the dish, but I was damned if I could think of it. I needed to get that rifle back. Excerpt from a letter from Razka on Sarindar to Marag on Nalori, 16th day of Sendrak, 23rd year of Talk. With the rifle slung over my shoulder, I started to climb. I am grateful that my great list of weaknesses does not include a fear of heights. Climbing the ladder was not difficult. In fact, I had done it several times before during the project. No, the fear that gripped me had solely to do with why I took the climb. But I continued to climb. And I tried not to think about the scream I had heard. I also was hearing odd scraping noises. I got to the top of the dish, and I saw that the monster was trying to attack Commander Gomez. For her part, Commander Gomez was trying to get away from it. She was bleeding from her face, and her uniform was torn and ripped. As soon as she saw me, she shouted at me to shoot the monster. First Officer's Log, Supplemental. I don't think I've ever been as happy to see anyone as I was to see Razka at that moment. I screamed at him to shoot the shii. Once he did that, everything else would come into place. He held up the rifle. Excerpt from a letter from Razka on Sarindar to Marag on Nalori, 16th day of Sendrak, 23rd year of Tog. But once again, I failed to shoot. I was programmed, it seemed. Nothing I could do could make me push the button. Not even the constant shouting of "shoot it" from Commander Gomez. Not even the monster finally able to slash at both her face and her torso. I saw her strangely colored blood flowing from 2 wounds on her face now, as well as her side, and still she shouted, "Shoot it!" And still I could not pull the trigger. Garbage in, garbage out. I knew for sure that I was not someone who could fire a weapon. I was, however, still the aide to the head of the project, so I would do what I'd been doing. I would help her. Commander Gomez was about 70 meters down the dish and about 10 meters to my left. I could not trust my ability to throw the rifle to her. I could, however, trust gravity. I laid the rifle down on the surface of the dish and let it slide toward the center. First Officer's Log, Supplemental. The pain in my side was the worst I'd felt since that Magato sliced me open on Neural 5 years ago. But I managed to crawl the 12 meters to where the rifle was going to wind up. Razka wasn't a fighter, and I respected that. I just wished she had realized it before that thing sliced me open. Speaking of which, it was still trying to maintain its grip on the dish, and was hoping to use me as an anchor. It dug one claw into my boot heel as I was crawling over toward the rifle. I managed to yank my foot out of the boot, which sent the thing sprawling back down toward the center, once again trying to get some kind of footing. The salty taste of my own blood from the 2 cuts on my cheeks, pain slicing through my entire torso like a phaser set on burn. I grabbed the sonic rifle, rolled painfully onto my back, and saw the shii getting ready to pounce on me again. It was almost funny. As it leapt through the air, I saw that my boot was still wedged in its claw. I fired the rifle. The shii was immobilized. Unfortunately, its momentum was still carrying it through the air, and it landed right on top of me. As bad as the pain in my side was before, it was 1,000 times worse now. I cried out in agony. But the good news was that the shii was just a dead weight on top of me. A very heavy weight. I managed to push the thing off me, and it still didn't move. And I tapped my comm badge. Computer, time! The grating, atonal voice of the Nalori computer said, "The time is 0014 hours. I had cut it close. The quasar pulsar window would close at any minute. If I didn't do this now, I wouldn't be able to for 14 hours. Computer, activate ACB. I now had 2 minutes to get to the center of the dish before the annular confinement beam reached full power. Excerpt from a letter from Razka on Sarindar to Marag on Nalor, 16th day of Sendrak, 23rd year of Tog. I had thought that everything was fine. The monster was stopped as planned. Commander Gomez was activating the beam that would stop it, and now she was moving toward the center. I too moved toward escape. Her route would take her to the underside of the dish. Ironically, the door she was using was the same one that I had guarded at the secondary hospital. My own route was simply back the way I came. And then I saw that the monster had started to move, and Commander Gomez hadn't reached the hatch yet. I reached for the tricorder, hoping that I might be able to stop it. Unfortunately, I fumbled with the device and dropped it. It fell dozens of meters to the ground. So instead, I called the commander's name. First Officer's Log, supplemental. And it was a good thing he did, because I was about to whirl around and fire one last time at the creature. Unfortunately, doing so seemed to rip open my wound, and I cried out. Then I heard the steady thrum that indicated that the ACB was about to come online. If I stayed where I was, I would be reduced to my component atoms inside about half a second. I dove for the hatch. Excerpt from a letter from Razka on Sarindar to Marag on Nalor, 16th day of Sendrak, 23rd year of Tog. And then I started climbing madly down the ladder. I had no idea if Commander Gomez had heard me or not. My main concern at that point was my own survival. That and the death of the monster shii. I heard the sound of the mighty engine that powered the dish. Forces that were intended to displace atmosphere and create a vacuum sliced through the air. The noise was deafening. The light was blinding. When we had first tested the beam, I had been standing at a safe distance. Now I was at anything but. I don't think that my ears will ever cease ringing. Nor do I believe that the spots will ever disappear from in front of my eyes. But I have to say it was a spectacular view. The nearby crystalline trees reflected the shimmering beam, which shot into the night with such intensity that I thought it would bisect the entire galaxy. A lifetime later, the beam finally ceased. There was no sign of either Commander Gomez or the monster shii. Second Officer's Log. Lieutenant Commander Kieran Duffy, Shuttlecraft Archimedes, Stardate 53291.0. I'm on final approach to the planet Sarindar. According to the Nalori Republic representative that Captain Gold talked to when the Da Vinci entered Nalori space 2 hours ago, all contact with Sarindar was lost several days ago. They had come across the transport ship, the Culloden, that had been assigned to the project. The Nalori had assumed that everyone else on the planet had been killed, but the testimony of the workers on the Culloden, combined with the sensor readings that the Da Vinci took, showed that the interference around the planet had gotten too heavy for even comm signals to get through. I just hope that Commander Gomez is okay. Personal Log, Lieutenant Commander Kieran Duffy, Shuttlecraft Archimedes, Stardate 53291.1. I landed on Sarindar to find the remnants of a tent system, some broken down machinery, a very large concave dish, and Commander Gomez and a Nalori getting very drunk on Saurian brandy. As soon as she saw me, the commander ran toward me and leapt into my arms. Before she did, I noticed that her uniform was torn in dozens of places, and she looked and smelled like it hadn't been laundered in weeks. She had 2 nasty cuts on her face, and she was clutching her right side as she ran. Then she kissed me. I would say that the commander is alive and well, and doing just fine. Personal Log, Commander Sonya Gomez, USS Da Vinci, Stardate 53291.5. I I had been quite convinced that Razka and I were going to get completely plastered long before anyone rescued us. But I didn't care. I was so giddy from actually defeating the shii and knowing that I was going to live that the fact that we would probably starve to death if someone didn't show up soon wasn't something either of us wanted to think about. Then I saw the Archimedes come swooping down out of the atmosphere. It was the most glorious sight I'd ever seen. Razka said it was the second most glorious, as he gave first prize to the ACB wiping out the shii. Sadly, I didn't get to see that, as I was under the hatch at the time. Part of it was the brandy, part of it was euphoria, and part of it was sheer stupidity given my torso wound, but a big part of why I ran into Kieran's arms was simply because I didn't want to ever let go of him. I learned a lot on this mission, and found out a lot of things about myself that I didn't like. Primary among them was that life is too damn short to let the good things get away. What Kieran and I had on the Enterprise was a good thing. There are probably dozens of good reasons why we shouldn't start up our relationship again, but right now, I can't think of a single one of them. Now we're back on the Da Vinci. I've been in touch with Senator Moya, and he actually apologized to me. Apparently, he wasn't showing the readings I sent along to the rest of the Senate because he believed they were fakes. One of his fellow senators insisted that he look at the full communiques from Sarindar, and suddenly the Senate thought that maybe their initial reaction was a bit on the harsh side. Unfortunately, by the time the Senate had realized their mistake, all communication with Sarindar had been lost, thanks to worse interference than usual from the quasar-pulsar combination. That's also why the Da Vinci's comm signal was so patchy. They had, in fact, dropped their mission to Trevis like a hot potato and come to rescue me. The current plan is to assign new workers to the camp, with Razka now in charge at my recommendation. He will follow the work schedule I laid out, and without the two shii to terrorize the workers, the SA should finally be finished. The Senate has also promised that Starfleet will be allowed to aid the team that studies and harvests the Chimerium. And best of all, they're willing to talk about allowing Starfleet safe passage through to Sector 969. Which means that the mission Captain Scott gave me back on Earth has actually been fulfilled. This should be good news. I just wish it hadn't come at the expense of so many lives. I was seriously tempted not to have Dr. Lenz get rid of the 2 scars I got. Razka said that they made me look like a Nalori who'd gotten his coming-of-age scars, and in a sense he was right. But I decided to get rid of them anyhow. Keeping scars is an affectation, suffered mostly by people with more mental difficulties than I'm willing to put on display. I did it after Captain Gold debriefed me and I had talked to Senator Moya. Now I'm in my quarters, having been instructed by both Dr. Lenz and Captain Gold to relax. But I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Zilder and Kajana and Jiro and the scores of others who died under my command. I guess the only way that I can make their deaths have any meaning to me at all is to live. And I intend to do just that. Gomez to Duffy, please report to my quarters. End log entry. And that's the story. Next week I will kick off Here There Be Monsters, which is the next story that I wrote in the sequence, and it's only two stories later. Between these two was The Riddled Post by Aaron Rosenberg, which was a nifty little adventure involving a very strange language and some other cool stuff going on. And Here There Be Monsters is not only, which comes after it, which is my next one, it is not only the next Corps of Engineers story, it's also linked to the Gateways crossover. In 2001, there was a crossover that involved all the different Star Trek series that existed at the time, which was called Gateways. And it involved the Iconian Gateways that we saw in the Next Generation episode Contagion and the Deep Space Nine episode To the Death. It also tied into the original series episode That Which Survives. Basically, the story involved the original series, in a story that took place actually right after That Which Survives. Challenger, which was a series that was supposed to, a novels-only series that was supposed to start and then wound up not happening. And then also, those were both 23rd century stories. And then for the 24th century, there were 4 novels that took place all at the same time and which were linked to each other in various ways. Next Generation story, a Deep Space Nine story, which I wrote, a Voyager story, and a New Frontier story, which is another novels-only series by Peter David. Basically, gateways start opening up all over the galaxy, and our crews have to deal with it in various ways. Voyager over in the Delta Quadrant, the Enterprise, the crew of Deep Space Nine, and the crew of the USS Excalibur all have to deal with it in the Alpha Quadrant. There was, and then I did for Corps of Engineers, I did a follow-up called Here There Be Monsters, which was basically an epilogue to the Gateway series. So that's what we're going to start on next week, Here There Be Monsters, which was a fun story for me to do. I hope you enjoyed Invincible. It was really fun revisiting this 20-year-old collaboration between me and one of my best friends. Please check me out online, DeCandido.net, which is a link to all my various social media and other places as well. Read my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. You can like my fan page on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Keith R.A. DeCandido, all one word. On Twitter, I'm at KRADEC, KRADEC. I'm KRAD418 on Instagram. There's this YouTube channel. You can look me up on Tor.com, where I've written a lot of stuff. You can find me on Wikipedia. You can find me on Amazon. You can find me on BarnesandNoble.com. You can find me on Kobo.com. You can find me at any book dealer you care to name. And check me out there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week for the next installment. Be safe. Bye.